My sister-in-law is a quintessential afterthought. At my nephew's graduation banquet, I gifted him a smartphone worth $6,000, to which my sister-in-law lamented. I was originally going to buy my son an iPhone, but since you have bestowed one upon him, I shall refrain from purchasing it, she remarked. I felt as though I had ingested a fly. Fortunately, the graduation celebration concluded without further incident. This matter was soon cast aside in my mind, until I met my demise at the hands of my nephew's relentless assault. In my final moments, my nephew struck me with the phone upon my blooming head, hurling insults and humiliation my way. "It's all your fault, you wretched being. Had it not been for you, my mother would have gifted me a phone worth over $10,000. I would not have taken this inferior device to school, nor would I have been ridiculed by my classmates, and I certainly would not be unable to find a girlfriend." After my death, my sister-in-law, wiping her tears, reproached me for my lack of foresight in gifting something of lesser value, declaring that I deserved to be slain and that I had brought misfortune upon her son. My brother blamed me for injuring his son's pride and ruining his future, berating me for bringing this upon myself. Meanwhile, my parents, while denouncing me as a harbinger of misfortune, prepared a letter of understanding. Thanks to my parents' letter of understanding, coupled with the fabricated testimonies of the entire family and my brother's abuse of his position to procure a mental health certificate for my nephew, he was ultimately acquitted of all charges. Witnessing such an outcome, my spirit, suspended in the ether, ignited with indignation. Upon reopening my eyes, I found myself inexplicably transported back to my nephew's graduation banquet. In my grasp lay the very mobile phone I had intended to gift him in my previous life. Memories of that past life surged through my mind in a rapid torrent, and the agony of being slain by my nephew caused my hand to tremble involuntarily. Recalling that prior occasion, I had presented him with a smartphone worth 6,000 yuan, only for my sister-in-law to declare her intention to take him to purchase an iPhone instead, claiming my gift was insufficient. In the end, she bound a red string around his wrist, transforming the extravagant gift into a mere trinket, a disparity that my nephew found utterly intolerable. Consequently, he attributed all his subsequent misfortunes in school to the phone I had given him, lamenting that my gift had deprived him of the iPhone, leading to ridicule from his peers, and ultimately resulting in my brutal demise at his hands. As I regained my composure, I noticed the collective gaze of those present fixated on the phone in my possession, particularly my nephew, whose eyes brimmed with eager anticipation. If he deems my gift inadequate, then this time, I shall refrain from presenting it, allowing his mother to lead him to acquire an iPhone worth over 10,000 yuan. 2. Concurrently, my sister-in-law's voice unexpectedly pierced the air. "Little sister, is this the phone you bought for Jiahao?" Oh dear. I had planned to take him to buy the latest iPhone after dinner. My sister-in-law recited the same lines as in my previous life. However, before she could finish, I swiftly interrupted her and hastily stowed the phone away. "Sister-in-law, you misunderstand. This phone is merely 6,000 yuan, hardly worthy of Jiahao. You have an eye for quality. That new iPhone is indeed splendid, truly befitting my esteemed nephew." With that, I turned to my nephew and urged, "Jiahao, why don't you thank your mother promptly?" Upon hearing that his mother intended to buy him an iPhone, my nephew was momentarily stunned, only to be roused from his excitement by my words, joyfully leaping up to embrace his mother. "Mom, I knew you cared for me the most." My sister-in-law appeared momentarily taken aback, clearly unprepared for my unexpected support. Her expression darkening slightly, though she managed to maintain a semblance of a smile. "Of course. You are my son. Who else should I care for?" Afterward, she turned to my nephew, adding, "But it must be approved by your aunt first." Immediately, she looked to me. "Little sister, do you think this phone is acceptable? We will defer to your judgment. If you say buy, we shall buy." My parents, realizing the moment, quickly chimed in, "Yes, let Nana make the decision. Our Jiahao deserves only the best, and surely Nana will agree. Won't you, Nana?" 3. As my parents extolled my nephew with flattery, they exchanged meaningful glances with me. I stifled a scoff. Are we really resorting to this again? This was the age-old strategy for discussing my nephew's upbringing, one playing the benevolent role while the other assumed the stern facade. My brother and sister-in-law, along with my parents, were the kind-hearted ones, while I had been cast as the stern figure. To prevent my nephew from developing a penchant for vanity and extravagance, my brother and sister-in-law adopted a frugal educational approach, yet they were reluctant to assume the role of the villain. Thus, whenever my nephew made unreasonable demands. They would rely on me as a scapegoat, either to dissuade him or to simply claim, "Andy won't allow it." At this moment, the glances they directed at me clearly signified that they wished for me to continue playing the stern role. They did not want my nephew to purchase such an expensive phone but were unwilling to appear harsh, so they turned to me to take on that burden. This was their usual tactic, but alas, I would no longer play the part of the villain. As for whether my nephew would succumb to vanity or wastefulness, what concern was it of mine? Moreover, if he were not vain, how could I implement my plans moving forward? For, with my brother and parents wearing expressions of confidence, I uttered words that instantly altered their demeanor. Of course we should buy it. This is a splendid opportunity, and I wholeheartedly endorse it. After that, I turned to my parents with a smile. Mom and Dad, you have both stated that my dear nephew deserves the very best, as his aunt. I would never hinder that. I am fully in support. Upon hearing my response, my parents and siblings looked utterly incredulous, while only my nephew beamed at me, making a heart gesture. Auntie is the best. Gazing at my nephew's face, I was reminded of the ferocity he had displayed when he took my life in the past. This is merely the beginning. There is much more to come. Once I finished speaking, my parents immediately began to chastise me, forgetting their earlier roles. What is the matter with you? Jayahao is just a child. Must you encourage such folly? That phone costs nearly 20,000 yuan. What student needs such an expensive device? My brother was equally taken aback by my enthusiastic agreement, his expression darkening in response. Wuna, what do you mean by this? My sister-in-law, in a state of panic, swiftly denounced the idea, having been the one to advocate for frugality. That phone costs over 10,000 yuan. This will only cultivate vanity in the child. How could you possibly support this? Faced with the reproaches from my parents and siblings, I too assumed the role of the stern figure, staring at them in disbelief. Dad. Mom, did you not just say that Jayahao deserves the best? Or is it that you truly believe he is unworthy of such a fine phone? After speaking, I turned to my brother. And what do you mean by that? Is this not fulfilling my sister-in-law's wishes? Or are you saying you have no intention of buying it for him? I then addressed my sister-in-law. Jayahao is already so grown. He is merely getting an iPhone. How is that a sign of vanity? Or were your earlier words merely for show, with no genuine intention of purchasing it for Jayahao? Upon hearing my remarks, my nephew's expression darkened, reminiscent of the look he had worn when he had killed me. Do you all truly not wish for me to have an iPhone? 5. Seeing their grandson's anger, my parents quickly denied any such thoughts. That is not the case. How could we possibly think that? My brother and sister-in-law, fearing the deterioration of their son's relationship with his grandparents, hurried to refute my claims. Do not listen to your aunt's nonsense. That is simply not true. I feigned misunderstanding. Turning to my sister-in-law, if that is not the case, then I must have misinterpreted. I thought you had changed your mind about purchasing it. In truth, she had never intended to buy it at all. In my previous life, she had only feigned interest after witnessing that I had already bought a phone for her son, merely attempting to elevate her own status at my expense. Yet her son took her words to heart, believing that my actions had prevented him from acquiring the coveted iPhone. Upon hearing my statement, my sister-in-law's complexion darkened once more, and she quickly replied, "It's just an iPhone. Of course, we can buy it. However, I have matters to attend to today. Let us go this weekend instead." With the prospect of receiving an iPhone, my nephew's expression brightened significantly. My parents and brother, however, frowned, clearly reluctant to spend over 10,000 yuan on a phone for my nephew. I observed their expressions with keen interest. It seems they are concocting yet another scheme to thwart this endeavor. 6. To my surprise, that weekend, my sister-in-law indeed took my nephew to the mobile phone store, even deliberately inviting me along, perhaps to demonstrate her commitment to her word. However, just as my nephew excitedly prepared to select his phone, my sister-in-law's phone rang. It turned out my parents had suffered food poisoning, and after concluding the call, we hastily made our way to the hospital. My brother and sister-in-law seized the opportunity of my parents' hospitalization to lecture my nephew. "Jayahao, your mother always keeps her promises. However, as you can see, your grandparents are ill and in the hospital, which incurs expenses. It is not that your parents do not wish to buy it for you. Do you think a phone is more important than your grandparents?" My nephew clenched his fists tightly, remaining silent. In that moment, I understood. This was the strategy devised by my parents and siblings. In the end, My nephew's smartphone was transformed into a more than $1,000 basic phone by my brother-in-law and sister-in-law under the pretext of his parents' illness. After my nephew stormed out of the hospital in anger, his parents miraculously recovered, and my sister-in-law smugly remarked, "See? Problem solved. $1,000 phone is still usable." Standing outside, I recorded this entire scene on my phone. Although I did not gift my nephew a phone in this lifetime, I can still prepare other presents for him. In this new life, I shall repay every grudge meticulously, be it my nephew's cruel betrayal, the distortion of truth by my brother and sister-in-law, or my parents' letter of forgiveness. Everything shall remain unforgiven. The incident concerning the smartphone appeared to be concluded, yet in reality, it was merely the beginning. I was also set to prepare a gift for my nephew, one that he would never forget throughout his life. That day, I called my nephew, Jiahao. "If you have some free time, come over. Your aunt will treat you to a grand meal and give you a present." In less than an hour, he arrived. I picked up the bag beside me and began rummaging through it. The moment my nephew saw me searching, his eyes sparkled with anticipation. However, when I pulled out a protective talisman from the bag, his expression turned to stone. Pretending not to notice, I stood up and hung the talisman around his neck. "Jiahao, this is a peace talisman I specially prayed for you at the temple. It will bless you with safety and success." After securing the talisman, I patted my nephew's shoulder. "Let's go. I'll take you out for a meal." Just as I was about to leave, my nephew's voice suddenly broke through. "Auntie, were you planning to give me that smartphone you had at the graduation banquet?" I was taken aback by his unexpected inquiry. Recalling his earlier disdain for the phone I intended to gift him. Did he truly expect me to offer him a smartphone now?
How naive.
I paused, turned back to him, and spoke with a tone of regret. "Indeed, that phone was meant for you. However, your mother insisted on buying you a smartphone, and I feared that if I presented you with one, she might not fulfill her promise. Hence, I refrained from giving it to you." Upon hearing my words, my nephew's expression grew increasingly grim. His fists clenched tightly, and his voice quivered with suppressed tears. "But she never bought me a smartphone." After uttering this, he looked at me with a hint of desperation in his eyes. "Auntie, since that phone was meant for me, can you perhaps give it to me now?" How ironic that he now desired the very phone he had previously scorned. I smiled and replied, "But you already have a phone. There's no need to possess so many." My nephew, growing anxious, retorted, "No. The broken phone my parents bought can't compare to your high-end one." The same phone he had once dismissed as inferior had now transformed into a coveted treasure. Truly, comparison breeds discontent. How ironic. As for the smartphone, I certainly would not be giving it to him. However, other gifts were within my reach. Sighing, I spoke with a tone of resignation. "Jiahao, the phone was indeed meant for you, but knowing your mother intended to buy you a smartphone, I returned it. Truth be told, buying you another one wouldn't be difficult. However, considering your grandparents' current health issues, it wouldn't be appropriate for me to do so at this juncture." My words instilled hope in my nephew, only to leave him feeling disheartened. Observing his disappointment, I quickly added, "But if you truly desire a smartphone, you could always earn the money yourself." Upon hearing this, my nephew's eyes sparkled with newfound determination, and he eagerly inquired about how to make money. "There are many ways to earn money, such as distributing flyers or working as a waiter. In a few months, you could accumulate enough for a phone." However, when he heard a few months, despair washed over him, and he muttered, "A few months? That's far too long." I understood that he was seeking a quick solution, and I had already prepared a method for him to earn money swiftly. I placed my hand on his arm and spoke earnestly, "Don't dwell on it too much. Come, let us have a meal first." As we walked toward the restaurant, I noticed numerous advertisements plastered on the walls. Frowning, I lamented, "It's infuriating. These people are becoming increasingly brazen, with ads for selling kidneys everywhere." "Sell kidneys?" my nephew asked in astonishment. I sighed. "These are merely temptations for those seeking quick money. Let us hurry along." After saying this, I led my nephew to the restaurant, but he seemed preoccupied throughout our meal. After dining, he excused himself, and we parted ways. Upon returning to the hospital, I sat in the upstairs office, peering through the window as I watched my nephew return to tear down the ads on the wall. Once he left, I returned to my desk and took a leisurely sip from my cup. The bait had been set. 3 days later, I received a call from my nephew's school. It turned out that he had not attended class that day, and my brother and sister-in-law were frantic, scouring the area for him. Meanwhile, my parents sat at home, tears streaming down their faces, fretting over the possibility of something terrible happening. I, however, lounged on the sofa, idly scrolling through my phone while keeping track of the time. I was well aware that my nephew had gone to sell his kidney. After contemplating for 3 days, he chose to sell his kidney, yet he had taken merely 3 minutes to kill me in the previous life. It wasn't until evening that my nephew returned home, looking weak and holding a newly purchased smartphone. Upon seeing him, my parents and brother and sister-in-law nearly burst into tears, rushing to embrace him. Yet the next moment, my nephew winced in pain and cried out, "Let go, it hurts, it hurts." Hearing his cries, my sister-in-law instinctively released him, looking down to find Jahao's white t-shirt stained crimson with blood. Panicking, she quickly lifted his shirt, revealing a thick bandage wrapped around his left side, soaked in dark red blood. He trembled in pain, his lips quivering. My sister-in-law was horrified. "Son, what happened? Who hurt you? Why is there so much blood?" As a doctor, my brother immediately recognized the severity of the injury. Grabbing my nephew's hand, his eyes reddened, and his voice grew hoarse. "What have you done?" My nephew gritted his teeth, cold sweat trickling down his face, and raised the smartphone he had just purchased like a trophy. "What did I do? I sold my kidney. Look, you wouldn't buy me one, so I did it myself." His declaration struck like a thunderbolt, leaving everyone in stunned silence. "What? You sold your kidney? Are you out of your mind? How could you do such a thing?" My sister-in-law finally snapped back to reality, her anger boiling over as she slapped Jiahao across the face. My nephew, already in pain, found himself drenched in sweat from the strike. He leaned against the wall, gritting his teeth as he shouted back, "You can break your promises, so why can't I sell my kidney? Sure, I lost one, but I gained my dignity. I'll never be mocked again." Upon hearing him speak of dignity, my sister-in-law's tears flowed uncontrollably, and she cried out, "It's just a phone. You sold your kidney for a phone and talk about dignity. How could you?" "Of course, it matters. Why wouldn't he it?" My nephew roared, confronting her. "You said you would buy me one, but what did you give me? A broken old phone. You made me a laughingstock at school." My brother and sister-in-law were left speechless, their eyes wide with shock, while my parents remained silent, unable to comprehend the situation. Eventually, they all collapsed into tears, exclaiming, "What a tragedy! How could this happen?" I stood outside the crowd, observing the scene before me, a cold smile curling at the corners of my lips. This was merely the beginning. My nephew, gleefully showcasing his beloved fruit-themed smartphone on social media, found his joy short-lived. Just a few days later, his exuberance faded into despair as he fell victim to an infection following a botched kidney sale at a disreputable clinic. He was rushed to the hospital where, after a frantic rescue operation and examination, it was revealed that he had suffered severe complications that would necessitate ongoing treatment. Upon hearing the news, my brother, sister-in-law, and parents were utterly devastated, as if the sky had fallen upon them. Meanwhile, I stood coldly at the periphery, clenching my fists as I watched my parents sob uncontrollably. In my previous life, not a single tear had been shed for me, despite my demise. They had condemned me as a harbinger of misfortune and had even provided a letter of forgiveness for my nephew. Now, however, they wept profusely over the loss of a kidney, revealing that, in their eyes, my life was worth less than my nephew's single organ. Yet, I found it all inconsequential. Since the loss of my nephew's kidney, our home had descended into chaos. My brother, sister-in-law, and parents took turns caring for him while also seeking justice from the clinic. After a mere month of this turmoil, they were utterly worn down. Fearing the situation would escalate, the clinic ultimately offered $2 million in hush money. However, no amount of money could restore my nephew to his former state. My brother, sister-in-law, and parents now regretted not purchasing that smartphone for him, believing it had driven him to such a desperate path. After spending half a month in the hospital, my nephew returned home to recuperate. Initially, the family was filled with sympathy and guilt towards him, but as time passed and his temper flared daily, their attitudes shifted. My brother and sister-in-law appeared busier than ever. Though I could not discern the nature of their busyness, while the responsibility of caring for my nephew fell solely on my weary parents. They reached out to me, pleading for assistance, but I declined, citing my work commitments as an excuse. Then one day, my parents called me with alarming news. Nana, something terrible has happened. You need to come home quickly. Something terrible? I thought, somewhat surprised. After all, I had not yet revealed my grand plan. The final straw that would break the camel's back had not yet been introduced. Logically, my nephew had not yet reached a breaking point. My hesitation lingered until my parents' frantic voices pierced through again. Jiahao is threatening to jump out the window. You must return immediately. Wu Jiahao was about to jump? This was unacceptable. If he died, what would become of my plans? With that thought, I leaped into action, driving home in haste. Upon my hurried arrival, just as I entered the doorway, I heard my nephew's enraged voice booming from the living room. I don't care. If you don't do as I say, I'll jump from here. His tone was laced with menace. I rushed towards the sound, only to find him standing on the windowsill, one hand gripping the frame, while my brother, sister-in-law, and parents stood 3 meters away, too frightened to approach. My sister-in-law was tearfully imploring him to step down. Son, what are you doing? It's dangerous up there. Come down immediately. You need to rest and heal. The doctor said you must take care of yourself. Though her voice was tinged with sorrow, it lacked the genuine concern of the past, carrying an undertone of impatience. As soon as she finished speaking, my nephew erupted in a furious tirade. Rest? While you complain about how much I've cost you. Do you think I'm just a burden, a useless person? Son, how can you say that? It's not true. Your mother and I love you dearly. We would never think of you as a burden. Ha! If you truly loved me, then what is this? He exclaimed, pulling a paper from his pocket and angrily tossing it at the crowd. It landed at my feet, and as I bent to pick it up, my expression faltered upon reading its contents. It was my sister-in-law's ultrasound report, revealing the words intrauterine pregnancy. So, she was expecting. No wonder my nephew was so agitated and threatened to jump. I had not anticipated that my brother and sister-in-law would provide such a catalyst for chaos. I stifled a smirk and turned to my brother and sister-in-law, feigning disbelief. Brother, sister-in-law, how could you? At such a critical time, you're planning for a second child? What on earth were you thinking? Caught off guard, my brother and sister-in-law exchanged panicked glances, while my parents wore expressions of astonishment that soon morphed into excitement. When I pressed them, my brother and sister-in-law stammered that it was merely an accident. I knew it was not, yet I refrained from exposing the truth, instead adopting a serious tone. Brother, sister-in-law, if this was unplanned, perhaps you should consider not keeping the child. Jiahao needs your utmost attention right now. How can you care for him properly if you bring another child into the mix? This second child was a hard-won blessing for my brother and sister-in-law. There was no way they would terminate the pregnancy. My sister-in-law immediately accused me. Wuna, how can you be so heartless? Even if it was an accident, this is still a life. How can you suggest terminating it? Have you no humanity? Heartless? Inhumane? Are you not heartless, too? Have you considered Jiahao's needs? He requires all your energy and care. Have you thought about how a second child will divide your attention? Hearing my words, my frail nephew trembled violently, and in the next moment, he screamed at my sister-in-law. See? This is what you call love. I'm suffering from pain, and instead of focusing on caring for me, you're thinking about having another child. You care less about me than my aunt does. Jiahao, how can you think that way? Your father and I only want what's best for you. The doctor says you will need care in the future. Having a sibling means you'll have someone to keep you company and help look after you. What good is that? It's all just excuses. If you truly cared for me, all your energy would go into taking care of me, not secretly planning for another child. I won't stand for it. It's either that child or me. If you don't terminate this pregnancy, I swear I'll jump. As he spoke, he extended one foot out the window, preparing to leap. My parents cried out, rushing to stop him, promising to meet his demands. All right, we'll do as you say. Just come down from the window. However, my brother and sister-in-law grew anxious and called out to my parents. A silent exchange passed between my parents and them, and seeing their expressions, my brother and sister-in-law nodded in agreement. Jiahao, your parents promise you. Tomorrow we will go to the hospital to terminate the pregnancy. Just come down, okay? Upon hearing their agreement, my nephew hesitated before retracting his foot. Are you telling the truth? You're not deceiving me? With firm assurances, My brother and sister-in-law guaranteed him that they would not keep the child. "We are not lying. We will not have this baby. We will go tomorrow." My parents quickly chimed in, "Yes, we will ensure they follow through." Still wary, my nephew fixed a chilling gaze upon them. "You swear?" For a moment, my brother, sister-in-law, and parents hesitated, then they hastily swore, "If we deceive you, may we never find peace." Seeing them swear, my nephew finally calmed down. The following day, my sister-in-law promptly went to the hospital to terminate the pregnancy and even showed my nephew the medical documentation afterward. He finally ceased his reckless behavior, and I was ready to begin my own plans. 2 weeks later, a post surfaced online questioning whether it was truly right for parents to deceive their child in such a manner. When my nephew stumbled upon the video, he was still mocking it, thinking, how unfortunate to have such parents. However, once he clicked to play and recognized the familiar faces, his laughter faded into silence. By the time the video concluded, he was utterly petrified. In a fit of rage, he stormed towards everyone, brandishing his phone. His voice a blend of despair and fury as he pointed accusingly at my brother, sister-in-law, and parents. "It's you. It was all of you. The way I am now. It's all because of you. Jahao, what are you talking about? What have we done? What on earth happened?" My parents and brother were bewildered by his seemingly nonsensical outburst. Yet, I understood the gravity of his words, a smirk curling at the corners of my lips as I anticipated the impending confrontation. Amidst the confused gazes of my brother, sister-in-law, and parents, my nephew raised his phone and clicked replay, the images of my family reappearing on the screen. Soon, the sound of conversation filled the air. "See? It's all sorted now. Even 1,000 yuan phone works just fine," my sister-in-law's triumphant voice echoed. "Is it really right for us to deceive Jahao like this?" Came my brother's hesitant query. "What's wrong with that? It's over 10,000 yuan. How could we buy him such an expensive phone? It would spoil him. I am only doing this for his own good," my sister-in-law complained. My brother muttered under his breath, "Wasn't it you who insisted on buying him an iPhone? If not for that, would we be in this situation?" "I was just joking. I never intended to buy it for him. I thought your sister was gifting him a phone, so I just said that. Who knew it would turn out like this?" After her remarks, my sister-in-law laughed again. "Our parents are clever. They thought of pretending to be sick." As the recording continued, the atmosphere in the living room turned stifling. Jiahao's complexion shifted from pale to crimson, and by the time the video ended, the intensity of his anger had escalated. He turned to my parents, his eyes ablaze with fury. "Grandpa, Grandma, you always say you love me, yet you concoct such a vile lie to deceive me? Are you happy to see me in this state? Is it your desire to see me rendered useless?" My parents looked panicked, desperate to explain, but Jiahao denied them the opportunity. In the next moment, his gaze turned venomous as he faced my sister-in-law. "And you? You never intended to buy me an iPhone from the beginning. But if you had no intention to buy it, why deceive me? If it weren't for your words, Aunt would have gifted me a better phone. Because of you, I became the laughingstock among my peers. You stripped me of my dignity. You destroyed me." My sister-in-law was taken aback, unable to comprehend how her words from the hospital had surfaced on Jiahao's phone. In a fluster, she hurried to explain, "Son, no, it's not as you think. I only wanted what's best for you. I didn't want you to become vain." As she spoke, she approached him to offer comfort, but before she could get close, he shoved her away. She cried out in pain, clutching her stomach. My brother, alarmed, rushed to help her up, anxiously asking if she was hurt. My parents, in a frenzy, shouted, "Quick, to the hospital. Our little grandson mustn't come to harm." Jiahao looked at the scene unfolding before him, his eyes instantly reddening. He trembled as he raised his finger, pointing accusatorily at his sister-in-law. You didn't terminate the pregnancy? You deceived me. You deceived me again." Faced with Jiahao's accusations, my brother, sister-in-law, and parents had no time to offer explanations or comfort. They hurried to the hospital. Once everyone had left, I approached Jiahao, patting his shoulder with a sigh. "Jiahao, I never thought your mother was just speaking offhandedly. As for that child, since your mother wishes to keep it, you should respect her decision." Having said this, I swiftly exited, for the look on Jiahao's face reminded me too much of the time he took my life in the previous existence. 3 days later, the internet exploded. A live stream went viral, though it was short-lived due to its graphic content being quickly banned. In the video, Jiahao, much like in the previous life, aimed a knife at my brother and sister-in-law. However, unlike before, where he had his kidney intact and was strong enough to brutally attack me, in this life, having lost a kidney, he lacked the strength. Instead, he resorted to drugging my brother, sister-in-law, and parents, binding them until they regained consciousness before carrying out his vengeance. He severed his sister-in-law's tongue, declaring, "Since you love to lie so much, there's no need to keep this tongue." The video captured the agonized pleas of my brother and sister-in-law, echoing my own experiences from the past life, yet it was all in vain. Jiahao presented them with the special food he had prepared. "Grandpa, Grandma, you've always pretended to suffer from food poisoning. Haven to you? This time, you won't have to pretend. I'll fulfill your wish. Don't blame me. It was you who said that if you deceive me, you want to meet a good end." I never anticipated that Jiahao would resort to a live stream. Calmly, I took out my phone and dialed the police while hurrying home. By the time I arrived, the police had already apprehended Jiahao. My brother and sister-in-law lay lifeless, just as I had in my previous life, unable to be saved. My parents, having consumed the tainted food, were rushed to the hospital for emergency treatment, while Jiahao was taken away by the police. Ultimately, my parents were revived. They wept and wailed, denouncing Jiahao as a demon. Hearing their accusations, I couldn't help but scoff. In my past life, when Jiahao killed me, they had cursed me throughout, blaming me for being a harbinger of misfortune, for dragging down their precious grandson. How ironic that now their beloved grandson had become the demon. Indeed, only when pain touches one's own life can they truly understand. Mom, Dad, Jiahao merely wanted an iPhone. If you had agreed to buy it back then, none of this would have happened. I approached them, echoing the sentiments they had expressed in my previous life. My parents erupted in rage. "Nonsense. As if he deserves it. I must have been blind to consider such a malicious creature precious. Oh, my son, my little grandson, gone, all gone." They cried and cursed, lamenting for their son and the unborn grandson, branding Jiahao a beast. Mom, Dad, regardless of the circumstances, Jiahao is your only grandchild. Will you truly stand by and watch him perish? If you provide a letter of leniency, it could reduce his sentence. In my past life, after I was slain by Jiahao, my parents had issued a letter of leniency. I was curious to see if they would do the same when it was my brother who had died this time. A letter of leniency? He's a demon. A murder? He killed your brother, killed my son. We will never forgive this monster. Now they recognize him as a demon and a murderer? Yet, in the previous life, what had they said to the neighbors? They had claimed that the child was still young, and it must have been my failure as an aunt that provoked him, blaming me for not fulfilling my role. It turned out that they could easily issue a letter of leniency simply because I was the one who had died. I didn't feel much pain. After all, I had already come to terms with it in my past life. After leaving the hospital, I began handling my brother and sister-in-law's affairs and estate until I received a request from Jiahao to see me, claiming he had something important to discuss. In the detention center, Jiahao's already frail body appeared even more emaciated. Upon seeing me, his expression twisted with rage as he yelled, "It's you. Isn't it? At the graduation banquet, you deliberately didn't give me the phone, did you?" I was taken aback that he would bring up that phone from my past life that he had once dismissed. I feigned innocence, replying, "How could you think that? Was it not because your mother mentioned she would buy you a fruit phone that I hesitated to gift you one? Who could have anticipated that she was deceiving you?" My nephew gritted his teeth, his eyes flashing with fury. "What are you pretending for? I know you did it on purpose. You have also been reborn. Haven to you? Why would you act this way, Rue? If you had simply given me that phone, none of this would have happened, and I wouldn't have ended up in this dire situation. It's all your fault, entirely your fault." Upon hearing his accusations, I raised an eyebrow and cast him a glance. I was taken aback to discover that my nephew had also experienced rebirth, albeit at an unfortunate time. In our past life, he blamed me for gifting him a phone, and now he reproaches me for not doing so? A smirk crept across my lips as I scoffed. "Gift you a phone? I fear you would then blame me for causing you to miss out on the fruit phone, for leading you to be mocked by your peers, for preventing you from having a girlfriend. Tell me, isn't Annie correct?" Wu Jiahua was utterly stunned, for those very words echoed his sentiments from the previous life. I had little inclination to engage him further, and turned to leave. Shortly after my departure, Wu Jiehua descended into madness, claiming he was mentally ill and asserting that killing was not a crime. He wished to evade legal consequences as he had in his former life. However, the doctors diagnosed him with no mental issues. While my parents had been revived, the trauma of witnessing my brother and sister-in-law's demise had taken a toll on their mental state. I sent them to a psychiatric hospital and, assuming the role of guardian, took control of their entire estate. As for my sister-in-law's parents, they had long passed, and with no siblings or relatives remaining, coupled with my nephew's death, all assets belonging to my brother and sister-in-law were inherited by me, including the $2 million from my nephew's kidney sale. Moreover, that fruit phone acquired through my nephew's sacrifice was sold on an online marketplace for a mere 1,000 yuan. Why such a low price? It felt inauspicious. I thought it only fair to offer the buyer some form of spiritual compensation. I also sold the properties of my brother, sister-in-law, and parents. Since my brother and sister-in-law's house was a site of tragedy, it sold for much less than market value. Adding together my parents and my brother and sister-in-law's inheritance, the total amounted to 50 million. With this fortune in hand, I resigned from my job and relocated to a different city, for after living 2 lifetimes, the memories the city held for me were far from pleasant. A month later, the verdict for my nephew was delivered. In this life, he could not escape the clutches of the law. The prison officials informed me that he was to be executed and wished to see me one last time. Naturally, I had no intention of meeting him. However, I left him with a parting remark, a grain of rice repaid with a dough of enmity. You are nothing but an ingrate. The end. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to our next story.